How toxic people react when you start setting boundaries. Here's the part nobody warns you about. The moment you finally choose yourself, toxic people lose their minds. Setting a simple boundary, something healthy, normal, and necessary, suddenly turns you into the villain of someone else's story. And that's the controversial truth most people never hear. Toxic people don't get angry because you hurt them. They get angry because you stopped letting them use you. That's when everything changes. If you've ever tried to move on from someone unhealthy, practiced emotional healing, or even dared to protect your peace after a breakup, you know exactly what happens. First, they get cold, then they guilt trip you, then the anger comes. Suddenly your self-love becomes selfish, your backbone becomes attitude, and your relationship healing becomes you're acting different. It's confusing, painfully confusing, especially when all you're trying to figure out is how to let go of someone who keeps pulling you back emotionally. But here's the counterintuitive twist you'll love. Once you understand the exact playbook toxic people use, their reactions stop feeling personal. They become predictable, almost textbook, and the moment you see the pattern, something in you shifts. Your heartbreak recovery becomes faster, your mind becomes clearer, and your self-love becomes unshakable, because suddenly you're no longer scared of their reactions, you're in control of your own. The sudden shift from charming to cold. When a toxic person senses that you're learning how to let go of someone or simply reducing their access to your time, they flip like a switch. One day they're charming, sweet, attentive. The next they're distant, cold, or strangely irritated. This shift isn't random. It's a reaction to you reclaiming self-love and disrupting the dynamic that fed their ego for so long. This abrupt change often leaves you confused, wondering if you did something wrong, especially if you're still trying to move on from past wounds or a painful breakup. Emotional healing becomes harder when their change of tone triggers old fears of abandonment or rejection. A practical exercise is journaling the exact moment their behavior shifted. Writing it down helps you see that their reaction is about control, not your worth, which accelerates heartbreak recovery. A public example of this pattern is the story Vanessa Bryant once shared about noticing sudden coldness during conflict in her marriage. She revealed how emotional withdrawal would appear whenever boundaries were set, making her question herself. Her experience shows how even strong, successful people can get caught in this cycle. And once you recognize this cold shift for what it really is, you start noticing the next tactic toxic individuals use almost immediately: guilt. The guilt trip strategy. The moment you try to reclaim your peace or figure out how to let go of someone who drains you, the guilt trips begin. Toxic people are experts at making you feel like your boundary is an attack instead of self-love. They'll say you're distant, different, or accuse you of causing a breakup when all you did was choose emotional healing over chaos. They might use sadness, dramatic sighs, or "I guess you don't care anymore" rhetoric to pull you back into the old pattern. This emotional manipulation hits especially hard when you're trying to move on or are still in heartbreak recovery. A practical way to counter this is to practice neutral statements, like, "I understand that's how you feel, but my decision remains." Saying it aloud in front of a mirror trains your nervous system to stay grounded during relationship healing. A clear public example is Britney Spears during her conservatorship years. Whenever she tried asserting even the smallest boundaries, people around her framed her choices as selfish or unstable, creating a guilt-driven narrative to keep control. Her story proves how guilt is a weapon toxic people use when they fear losing access to your energy. And when guilt doesn't work, they usually shift into something stronger: irritation or anger disguised as concern. Anger and pushback. When guilt doesn't work, anger usually takes the wheel. Toxic individuals see boundaries as a rejection, so they respond with irritation, snappy comments, or passive-aggressive jabs. And if you're still learning how to let go of someone who once meant something to you, that anger can feel overwhelming, like you've done something wrong by protecting your own emotional healing. Their pushback often sounds like, "You're overreacting," "Why are you being like this?" or "I'm just trying to help." But underneath the disguise of concern is fear of losing control. A helpful strategy is writing down every angry reaction you receive after a boundary. Seeing the pattern in black and white makes heartbreak recovery faster by showing you how predictable their behavior really is. It's a key part of relationship healing, recognizing that their anger is about them, not you. A real-life example is Megan Fox's experience with boundary setting during her highly publicized relationships. She once shared how asserting limits was met with intense pushback or emotional volatility, making her doubt herself. Her story reminds us that even strong, confident women can be shaken by someone's anger. And when anger stops working, toxic people often switch to a colder tactic: silence. Silent treatment as punishment. When a toxic person feels their anger isn't pulling you back, they reach for one of the most manipulative tools: silence. Suddenly, the messages stop, the affection vanishes, and the warmth disappears overnight. For someone trying to move on or practicing emotional healing, this sudden emotional blackout can trigger panic, especially if you're still learning how to let go of someone who once gave you attention. The silent treatment isn't about needing space. It's a punishment meant to make you feel guilty, anxious, or desperate for reconnection. It targets the same emotional wounds that make heartbreak recovery so difficult. A practical tactic is creating a reality list. Write down what actually caused the silence, your boundary, not the story your fear tries to invent. This helps restore self-love and prevents you from chasing someone who is intentionally creating emotional confusion. A strong example is Jennifer Aniston's experience with being iced out during conflicts in past relationships. She's spoken about how silence was used as a weapon to force her into apologizing just to restore peace. Her insight highlights how silence from a toxic person isn't peace, it's pressure. And when silence stops controlling you, toxic people often switch to their next tactic: becoming the victim. Playing the victim. When silence fails to pull you back, a toxic person often flips the script entirely and becomes the injured one. Suddenly, you are the cold one, the selfish one, the unstable one, all because you dared to protect your emotional healing. And if you're still figuring out how to let go of someone who once held power over your heart, this victim act can shake you, making heartbreak recovery feel like a maze. They might tell mutual friends their version of the story, exaggerate your boundary, or claim you changed overnight. This tactic works because it targets your empathy, the same empathy that kept you in the relationship longer than you should have stayed. To counter it, practice emotional detachment by writing a short script you can return to, such as, "Their story doesn't define me. My truth is enough." Tools like this strengthen self-love and keep your relationship healing on track. Think of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. For years, Meghan was painted as the villain in narratives created by people who felt threatened by her boundaries and independence. She spoke openly about how the victim playing around her was used to manipulate perception. Her experience shows how common and powerful these tactics are. And then when playing the victim stops working, toxic people often escalate by testing your boundaries directly. Testing the boundary repeatedly. Once a toxic person realizes their victim act didn't reel you back in, they switch to something sneakier: constant testing. They'll accidentally cross the line you set just to see if you'll enforce it or collapse. And if you're still learning how to let go of someone or rebuilding emotional healing after a breakup, these little tests can pull you right back into old patterns before you even notice. Maybe they send a harmless message late at night. Maybe they bring up topics you said were off limits. Maybe they show up in places you frequent by coincidence. Each tiny poke is designed to see whether your heartbreak recovery is real or temporary. A helpful tool is implementing a boundary reaffirmation rule. Every time they test a limit, calmly repeat the same line, something like, "My boundary still stands." It protects your self-love while strengthening your relationship healing. A clear celebrity example is Miley Cyrus after her separation from Liam Hemsworth. She revealed in interviews that even after their breakup, certain lines were blurred and tested repeatedly, moments she later understood as challenges to her newly established boundaries. Her experience mirrors what many people live behind closed doors. And when all the subtle testing fails, toxic individuals often jump to their final tactic, love bombing. Love bombing to regain control. When every manipulative tactic fails, guilt, anger, silence, victimhood, testing, toxic people tend to circle back to the one strategy that worked in the beginning, love bombing. Suddenly they're sweet again, affectionate, attentive, and acting like the person you fell for. But this isn't emotional healing. It's a last attempt to stop you from learning how to let go of someone who was never consistent in the first place. They show up with long messages, apologies dripping in charm, or "I've been thinking about us" texts after weeks of chaos. They may even promise therapy, change, or a total transformation. But these bursts of affection rarely last. They're designed to keep your heartbreak recovery from moving forward. A practical way to stay grounded is the 10-day observation rule. Don't respond emotionally. Don't reopen old doors. Just watch their actions. Real change lasts. Manipulation fades fast. A strong example of this cycle is Kourtney Kardashian's past relationship with Scott Disick. Every time she set a boundary, he'd come back with emotional declarations and promises of being a new man, only for the cycle to restart. She eventually realized self-love required stepping out for good. And now that you've seen all 7 reactions toxic people use, your mind is finally prepared for what comes next. Now that you know exactly how toxic people react when you set boundaries, here's the question that really matters. What are you going to do with this awareness? Boundaries mean nothing if you don't enforce them. Consistently, calmly, and without apologizing for protecting your peace. Emotional healing only works when you stop reacting to their tactics and start choosing the version of yourself who finally believes they deserve better. Think about it. How many times have you broken your own limits just to avoid conflict, guilt, or loneliness? How many times did you let someone back in because they suddenly acted sweet, only to repeat the same breakup cycle later? Your heartbreak recovery depends on asking yourself the hard question: why do I keep giving people access to parts of me they haven't earned? And even more importantly, what boundary am I finally ready to enforce starting today? If this message resonated with you, don't just close the video and go back to old patterns. Comment below and tell me which boundary you struggle with the most. Trust me, you're not alone. And of course, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell because you deserve ongoing guidance, clarity, and support as you strengthen your self-love and keep moving toward healthier relationships. Your transformation is just beginning. I just released a video about red flags that look like chemistry but aren't. If you like this content, I recommend you check the video on the link.